Hi, welcome to One Degree Shifts. I'm Pascal Tremblay. I'm the co-founder of Nectara, and today I'm joined by Rebecca Nicholson, who's a very interesting person in the space that I've briefly met. 3 years ago we were talking about already. It feels like forever ago, but I first met her as the co-founder of 5D Capital, and I was immediately pulled into sort of 5D's vision for the space, which was all about regeneration, purpose-driven capital, really meeting the space in a way that is much more holistic and much more less extractive and more about regenerating systems. And I thought that was a really interesting approach to this, because in the space itself, when I was looking for potential partnerships with folks, a lot of it was traditional capital, and I felt like 5D was really pushing the envelope and really sharing a voice that represents the work of plant medicines really well. So hi, Rebecca. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
What are you up to these days?
Thank you. So nice to be here with you. What am I up to these days? Well, that's like, it's a big question. So many things. I don't even know where to start, to be honest. And thank you for such a lovely intro as well around 5D. And it was really such an honor to be able to hold that space when psychedelics became very exciting around the world. And we got to really work with true heart-led warriors that we really felt were working with integrity. And, you know, we got to have those conversations with the people that we felt weren't working with the right energy. And it was just such an honor to be able to represent not only, you know, and protect in a way the plant medicine, indigenous wisdom, and all of, you know, those different spaces, but also to be a female voice in the space of finance and business as well, and making investments into, we felt, really the right hands and the right light warriors. So it's been a true honor. Yeah, so I don't know, do you want me to go into like what I've been up to since 5D, or where would you like me to start?
Yeah, that sounds good. What's it like for you these days?
Yeah, so pretty much I started 5D with my now ex-business partner, and we closed the fund about 4.5 years ago. It was called the Progression of Consciousness Fund. And it was such an incredible time of my life. And I was really thrown into, you know, the lion's den of the space of impact investing. And I really just was given such an opportunity to learn and be immersed in the entire industry. So since then, I've been really loving all of these continued opportunities that keep coming my way, consulting with a few different psychedelic companies. But I have to say, since the start of 5D to now, the whole industry has been like this, and then a little bit like this, and then a little bit like this, and then a little bit like this. So it's like, once we kind of feel these opportunities where we're taking, you know, steps forward, all of a sudden we're taking steps back. So it's really this kind of play of, what does this look like? We don't really know what this industry is going to look like in the future. You know, people that are going to be in this for life. I will be in this space for life in different ways, and different support as an advocate. Working with different companies that need the support, and, you know, from my experience, what I can offer up in that in so many different ways, but also really just focusing on health, wellness, and psychedelic healing as a whole. So working with a handful of different startups right now, which I'm super excited about, building out kind of more opportunities around what I've already done. So yeah, it's been a pretty exciting.
It's a juicy topic.
And I'm like, you know, running around and doing everything as best as I can.
Yeah, and dealing with people pulling your garden with their car, as you experienced this morning. So that's part of life. That's part of integration, is like dealing with stuff.
Like they're renovating this house next door, and this, you know, the big Q van is pulling out, takes off my entire like wooden garden, you know. So yeah, anyways, it's just like me out there dealing with all these guys. What are you doing? So
that's when you know, like, where you're at with your integration process is, how do I navigate this in a graceful way?
In totally graceful way, you know. And it's, at the end, it was like, thank you so much. They fixed it. They made it look actually better than it looked before. And I was like, well, you know what, I'm going to need new windows at some point too. And they're like, well, call James. So we're all friends now, and everything's good.
Yeah, it's funny how it all works out sometimes. Yeah. And yeah, what you talked about, you know, with 5D and sort of the work you've been doing, I'm very passionate about this subject because it's a pretty juicy topic. Like, how do you do business in the psychedelic space? And when I say psychedelic space, you know, the plant medicine retreats and the underground and every individual facilitators, I include all of that in there. It's a pretty large community. And you know, when we talk about business, to me, it also means like, how do we organize ourselves well as a community, and how do we push forward in a good way, and where are we going, and why are we doing this? How do we serve this space well is a pretty big question that I hear a lot from myself and Elaine too at Nectara, and other people we talk to. How do we do business in this space in an ethical way, and how do we reframe? And to me, this is a really juicy question, which overarches all of this, is how do we reframe extractive systems into regenerative ones that regenerate life? Because if we're not doing that as a space, then what are we up to really? We're just going to be repeating the same mistakes that we've made in the past. And I think what I'd like to start with today is exploring this question: how do we serve well? Is how do we view this work? And if you're a facilitator, if you have a clinic, if you have a retreat, if you're investing in the space, if you're part of any organization in the space, is the approaching this work as a healing vehicle for our own personal work. And that's a pretty crunchy subject for us, like mixing business, money, and service. And it starts within our own stuff, our own internal stuff. How do you view that sort of question of service as an internal healing vehicle within the psychedelic space? How do you view that personally for yourself?
Yeah, I mean, it is such a big, vast question and conversation, but really we have to start with ourselves, right? Like, heal yourself first and heal the world. But then you also witness a lot of people that do this type of work and this medicine. And when you're in it, it's so easy to say, oh, I just want to help people. I just want everyone to feel this, you know, because it's this incredible opportunity where you feel such an opening and such an opportunity for growth. And you really feel like you can do it for everyone else and hold space for everyone else too, you know? And I remember having the exact same feeling as that. How do I do that? How do I help people in the best way possible? And how do I make it more accessible? And how do we take our talents and how do we merge them all together? We all each hold different superpowers. So how do we bring those all together? And one thing I really witnessed as well, and especially in the impact investment side of things, and really advocating for retreats and natural plant biomass and group ceremonial healing and all of in nature and all of these incredible ways of healing. But the question was always, well, how do you turn that into a return of investment, right? What's the ROI? And it almost just felt so cringy to even talk about, you know, investors' money and how they're going to, you know, make money off of it. How are they going to scale these companies? And of course, that's always the question when these companies are trying to raise money to stay alive and to continue to help people. So it is a bit of an exhaustive conversation, because where does it go and how do you do it? And I remember, you know, the last experience that I had, I remember, you know, my own process and having this incredible moment where I was like, this is not about ROI. This is not about people making money off of this work, really. I mean, of course, amazing facilitators need to be paid and balanced and taken care of. And there needs to be a way where people are compensated for this work, but it's a different type of compensation. I don't believe it should be about numbers and how people are going, you know, people with money, how they're going to make more money. I don't really feel like it should be about that anymore. And I think that that's something that was always such a big conversation in this space, specifically around impact investing, specifically more around the retreats. How do people make more money? I don't know if that's the case. I really just feel like we need to continue to create more community. How do we support each other better? How do we create more healing opportunities that are actually safe, with the right facilitators, with the right integrity, with the right initiative? People that, you know, I always ask the question, people that were raising money, I always ask them when I was meeting them, why do you want to do this? Why? You know, where is this need coming from? And if the need is to, you know, be a superstar in, plant medicine work, if the need is to make more money on the money you already have, if the need is to buy a crazy island for rich people to go to and heal their trauma, I don't know if that is the right way. And to be honest, and I've said this before, oftentimes the medicine weeds them out without, people even having to do anything. It just weeds them out. And that's part of the magic.
Yeah,
And
and you're talking about a completely different metric of value and success, really, which I think to me is one of the biggest themes of the next century, is redefining what wealth truly means. I think, beyond sort of the basic needs that we all have, and there's a very physical and financial. Hi. If you're watching and if you're listening on Spotify, you can't see this really cute, adorable, chunky cat. That's an abundant cat.
He's muscular, Pascal.
He's muscular. Yeah, exactly.
This is Zeppelin. We just rescued him a little while ago, but he's a beautiful Bengal.
Wow, that's beautiful. So he's definitely been very well served in this life.
Well, I don't know who saved too. We talk about, killing people, but I saved him, but he also may have saved me. It's funny, this actually incredible woman, one of the OG psychedelic women in this space, she saw a picture of him and she immediately had a download, and she was just like, he is your spirit protector. You have to keep him, as he's like trying to steal my pencil right now. But she was like, he's in your life now for a reason. And that's just the way it is. So I couldn't find his family. He was very sick when I got him, but we fixed him. We healed him up, and now he's causing havoc.
Oh, he's beautiful. Yeah, he's beautiful. So yeah, this talks about redefining wealth and what it truly means. And I think there is sort of this, and I've seen it within myself with Nectara, and having gone through this process of being a founder for 3.5 years, like it just starts reflecting all your stuff all the time, and there's something new every week that comes up around your own personal work that gets reflected through some parts of the business. And I think early on, especially in the beginning, I was chasing growth, and I was chasing scale, and I was like, oh, we need to be bigger and we need to know these numbers. And over time, what's really surfaced for me is just the idea of scaling in a very intentional, in a very focused and different way, like scaling values, scaling ethics, scaling relationships, scaling value that we provide for people's journey at a really affordable cost, like those type of things. And also competition. Yeah.
Right.
What's that?
Yeah. We all need to eat. So
yeah, there's always this tension, right? Of like, oh, there's this metric, which is money, and there's a very shallow metric. And then there's this metric of like, you're in the ceremony, like you said, and we want to share this, and we want everyone to sort of have this experience if they choose to have it. And yet I think it's challenging a lot of ancestral things, a lot of planetary things, a lot of social structures, a lot of ideas around what success really means. And as a founder, like that's been probably the biggest medicine I've received from doing this. And I see like every dollar we invest in Nectara is an investment in our own healing path. Like this is our integration work now. And to that topic, what's changed for us is just this idea of how do we collaborate together with other groups? How do we make hundreds of different small groups and connections that can help nourish all of it, rather than having these giant monolithic organization that raise a lot of money and end up having these financial pressures internally, which ends up changing all of their work because the metric is based on capital.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's almost like we need a psychedelic ambassador in every city, right? Like the person that everybody around them, or can actually give really good advice or education or opportunities to work with people that are vetted, and to figure out all of those opportunities. Because nowadays I find since kind of this space and industry, it's definitely cooled off, especially with MAPS and Lycos not moving forward at this point. Who knows what's going to happen in the States? Things might open up, considering the new government. It's interesting. But like with Oregon, Colorado, Massachusetts didn't go forward, but there might be a couple next coming up. But people are definitely interested And it's often, you know, with you and I, we're in this space, so we know so much about it. We know so many people in this space. We've, you know, been
Hmm.
really marinating in it for a while now, but there's, you know, most of the world really doesn't know anything about it, right? It's
Yeah.
like there's
Which
so
was a
many people.
surprise to some of us for like 3 years ago, like,
Well,
oh, it's
yeah,
gonna boom, it's gonna be easy. It's not
right.
easy.
But oh, wow, this is amazing. Doesn't everybody know that? No, nobody knows that, right? We're like, I don't know, 5%. Who knows what the statistics are? But really, people are very interested because there's articles that come out every single day about the healing opportunity and what it's doing for frontline workers or veterans or PTSD, eating disorders, depression,
Hmm.
anxiety, you name it, like addictions. There's all of these things. So, of course, all of these articles are coming out. So people are again becoming like, oh, interested and curious, and how do I do this work, how do I get these substances, who do I work with, how do I make this happen? And the information isn't out there, so of course people are going to make these choices because they're ready, they want to do the work, but they're not finding the right people oftentimes. And then, you know,
Hmm.
and then unfortunately, you know, potentially more trauma is going to be happening, and then there's, you know, like bigger problems that we're going to be dealing with. But I have people reaching out to me all the time about where they can go, how can they do it, where, you know, like who with what, or like how people want to get off their antidepressants and they want to microdose. So there's all of these different ways where,
Hmm.
you know, people really do want to start stepping into their own healing, but it's just so inaccessible still for most people,
Yes,
especially,
and it's also
right?
it, and it's
Well,
also a bit of a wild west, like you just touched on. It is a difficult. It's such a interwoven space, and it really touches back on the personal healing part of like who is creating these organizations, who is leading these groups or these ceremonies, like who are they and what do they value the most? Like what are their ethics? Like how do you measure that? How do you even know? Like how do you vet someone and to fully endorse and refer people to the right places? It's difficult to do that, and I think there
yeah.
that I've been saying this for a couple of years now. The biggest need that this space has is around ethical frameworks and ethical vetting and ethical guiding of folks to the right people, and start elevating the ethical and effective spaces to do healing work, and to also help elevate those who may need a bit more support, and have a
Mhm.
communities of support to help those. And so not shunning people away, but just elevating those who are open to improving their ways of serving. um,
Mhm.
I'm curious, like what's one thing you've learned in the last 4 years personally as someone who's in the space? Like, what's a big lesson you've learned? I could share a whole
Me.
list of lessons I've learned in the last. I'm curious about yours.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there is a whole list of lessons as well. Um, Really, I mean, there's so many different ways we could go around that conversation, but the ethical piece is everything, not only to protect the journeyer, but also to protect the facilitator, right? So it's like there's two ways to think about that. But I have seen so many beautiful things in the underground space, and I know there's beautiful underground servers, but I also have seen quite a dark kind of undercurrent in the underground as well, which is always concerning. Which is again why we need to be able to create more safe spaces for people to either, you know, do deep healing opportunities or even just to explore their consciousness, right? And that should just be a basic human right to have that opportunity to do that legally. Um, so yeah, I mean, what else have I learned? I mean, it's just such a personal journey, right? We all have such unique different brains, we all have such different traumas that we're holding on to in our bodies. It's not just the story that we tell anymore, it's not just healing from neck up, it's not the monologue that we tell our therapists, you know, for years and years and years and actually don't get anywhere with the story. It's our bodies,
Mhm.
our bodies hold on to so much of this. And you know, since I started deeply going down my own personal healing journey, I really started to step more into alternatives such as somatic therapy or IFS, interfamily systems. And that's
Mhm.
been incredible, you know, to the point where it's broken down different relationships in the way they needed to be broken down so that I could step more so into my own power and my
Mhm.
own strength and as me as a person, whereas exactly where I need to go and what I need to do. So again, it's like there's so many different routes to go around that, but I mean, it's an incredible space to be in. The community is beautiful. Again, we're all just searching for those communities and those connections. And truly, people do end up in a
Hmm.
better place after the work. The hardest part is just showing up. It's like when I used to teach yoga, it was the hardest part was just showing up to the mat. Or when you do cold
Yeah.
plunge, the hardest part is just making that instant decision to step into the freezing cold water and then
Hmm.
just breathe, right? Just showing up for yourself. You're always going to feel better afterwards, but you have to move through the discomfort. You have to just move through it with grace, get on the other side, and you're going to see how that changes almost the neurological chemical makeup within your body. So
Hmm.
yeah, many,
Yeah,
many
it's
different.
quite the adventure actually to be in this space here, right? Because we meet incredible people, and if I find that's probably the biggest privilege I have to be we're operating in this space is that we meet amazing people every day, and it really is a reflection piece for ourselves. And I'm speaking of Elaine, my co-founder and wife as well, around what we keep learning for ourselves through other people's reflections of how they show up and how they relate and how they communicate. So as part of business founders, to us that's been the most enriching part, is understanding how to be in this space in a way that meets people where they're at, and also navigating the everyday challenges of business, which are very real and very present. And and how do we balance that sort of business way of doing things with sacred work? That's a really interesting topic that I think a lot of facilitators, for example, really struggle with. Like, how do I charge for this work? Like, how much do I charge? Like, how do I feel good charging this? There's a whole lot of stuff about
Mm,
money in this space. And as a business, there's a lot of things around competition, around like holding things by yourself, around not sharing, around trying to get big and all the stuff we talked about. But
mm,
the money piece is such a charged thing. Like, how do you see that, like the role of
yeah.
money and the energy it has in the space? It's a very strong one, isn't it?
It is so strong. I mean, money in general for people is
Yes.
trauma. Like, I
It's
need
even it,
more of
it
it.
seems even more amplified when you're doing sacred work. It's like
It's like it's tricky. It's money is a tricky conversation. And I think that in any regard, in relationships, money can be tricky. In business relationships, money can be tricky, as homeowners, as parents, as like real life struggles. Money is a tricky situation. So how do you put a number on healing work? It's like, how do you put a number on artists? Right? Like, all I know is we need more of them. We need more artists. We need more art. We need more theater. We need more real things. We need more healers. We need to be able to support the real people out there doing the real things. I know AI is happening. I know tech is forever, and nothing's going to stop that. But where we need to put our resources into the realness, because we're struggling as humans. We don't have communities built up anymore. We don't have, in our indigenous teachers or the indigenous communities, when someone's suffering, they come together and they hold that person, and they
Mhm.
they hold until that person is better. And what are we doing right now? I mean, in Toronto, here in the biggest city of Canada, it's like fractured communities. And I'm sure there's some areas that feel really strong community, but again, people are so busy. Go, 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 work, 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 work. The kids' classes, the kids' courses, and all of that kind of like ruptures strong communities. I grew up in Prince Edward Island, so the smallest province of
Mm.
Canada coast. So I grew up in real community in the middle of the woods. Like, my dad built the house I grew up in. So for me, it's been a struggle being in Toronto. So I've been here longer than PEI now. Like, I came here when I was 18 to go to university, but I've been searching for that same feeling since I got here. That
Mhm.
same community. So I don't know how I got on this tangent of community, but again, how do you monetize and how do you put a number on your art? And as
Mhm.
a plant medicine server or a psychedelic space holder, or, you know, all of these different kind of healing modalities, how do you put a number on that? Because that is
Mhm.
our that is intuition, and that is energy. How do you put money on energy? How do you put money on intuition?
Yeah.
I don't know how to do that, but I know that you have to do it. I know that the healers need it, but there's no rhyme or reason why it should be this much or that much. I remember at one point I brought this feng shui master into my house to like do a whole walk around, and boy, was it very interesting and also like disconcerting in a lot of ways. But anyways, when he was like, it's so hard to put a number on the cost. And I was like, yeah, I know. Like, how do we figure this out? And it was really informative. I took like pages of notes. Like, it was quite incredible. But he literally looked down and he found a receipt on the ground and he looked at the numbers and he was like, you can just pay me that. Like just a random piece of garbage. And, it kind of made sense. And I was like, okay, sure, let's do that. But again, like we can't just play around in that way. Like people need to pay their bills. It goes from like the 10D to the 3D, right? So 10D is the healers and energy and intuition and plant medicine and magic and mysticism. And then the 3D is, oh, okay, now I have this gas bill and now I have this, energy bill and now I have this mortgage and I have to feed my kids and pay for gas. And so it's really hard to match up those two worlds. I know a lot of servers out there doing the work for free, just as like almost a give back, which is incredible. And I think it's because they have the means to do so. But yeah, it's a tough one. But I do believe that, people need to figure out how to step into their power more so and to truly ask with confidence what they deserve and to create that and to honor that balance, the work that they're doing for people that need to do the work.
Yeah, it has to feel regenerative, right? In all the levels. And there's people, the facilitators that I actually helped also set up their spaces and, travel with them to set up spaces, and they work so hard and then they don't charge enough. And then that ends up becoming a real life issue. Like they don't have enough abundance. And so they struggle in some ways, and they show up in that work and in a less than optimal way. And I think you touched on that earlier around community. And I think it's important we should talk about that, given the multiple aspects of this work, which can go deep into our own healing work and even lineage stuff and deeply held beliefs and things. I think the importance of community is understated sometimes in some ways, especially as people who do business or facilitators, is having a community of support, like people to check in with, people to help guide you and to keep you accountable to the work you're doing. And I think that's really important because no one has all the answers. So I think we're building a spaceship in midair in space while flying it, basically. So none of us have the answers, like you said earlier. So we're kind of stumbling forward, failing forward. It's kind of like
I love that, Pascal, as well, because I know that I remember you did an educational component on psychedelics and narcissism. And I thought it was also so interesting because I had met this facilitator, this incredible woman, like an OG, she's in her mid 60s and she's, serving medicine. And I remember having a conversation with her at one point, and she admitted to me that she was working with a gentleman that was definitely on the highest kind of spectrum of narcissistic personality disorder. And I was, reflecting on that and thinking, well, it's not really ethical for you to be serving medicine this regularly with somebody that is, dealing with this mood disorder. It's one of the cluster B mood disorders that they say should not probably be doing psychedelics. And she really didn't know anything about it. And I sent her resources. I sent her a few articles. I don't know what's happening there anymore. But again, like these systems need to be continued to be built out to support facilitators, so that she could go, if she had that community, she could have gone to her community and said, I know this is happening and how do I deal with that? So it is those difficult kind of choices and kind of understanding what to do.
What I'm curious to hear, like, what's your support system? I can share a bit more about mine. Like, obviously, my partner is a big one because she knows me very intimately, so she'll pick up on stuff pretty quickly. And we have our guides and our community feedback from people and mentors. I have a coach, and that's a really good place to come and get support. And of course, we have our partners, as well. And I think just for us, what's been the most helpful is always asking, like, how can we do better? Like just having this very humble approach to this work, because ultimately we're going to mess up sometimes, and we have messed up, so it's going to happen. And like Sandra Dreisbach, who's an ethics consultant and one of our partners, she says it's not a question of when you're going to mess up, it's how you're going to mess up and how you're going to get community support around your mess up. And a lot of healing and a lot of of learnings have come through messing up and then repairing with someone else and having that conversation in a very humble and open way of saying, how can I do better? I think that's a big part of it, is just being humble to the fact that, we're flawed in some ways and we can keep learning as well.
100%. I mean, even just being a parent you're like fully in that all the time. We're messing up all the time. I'm messing up all the time. I don't want to say
I messed up like an hour ago with my son Noah. So
literally, I mess up all the time. And like, it doesn't feel good, right? So how do we repair? And it truly is all about the repair. And now I start seeing I have two boys, one is 12 and one is 8, and I'm starting to see them repair, which is making me so proud, because obviously they're learning how to repair from when they mess up, because truly we are humans and we're going to mess up, and we do need those communities to support us and help us. And I have incredible friends in my life, incredible acquaintances, people that I feel like I could call in a moment's notice and they would be there for me, and people very deeply ingrained in this space, but also in like the business space or the finance space, or, in all of these different worlds. And it's really just about kind of, you're right, being humble and taking those opportunities where you can ask for help. Because I think that's one of the hardest pieces too. Like, I'm really good at repair and saying, oh man, I really messed up. I'm so sorry. I could have done this better. But asking for help, I think, has been the hardest piece for me. And I think that's something that came up in some of the, my own personal healing work was, deserving of that, right? How to be okay with asking for help, and maybe trusting that that person will say, yes, I'm here for you.
That's a big one for me too, because I've always been sort of a lone wolf, like doing things my own, like succeeding that way. And then I've had the most healing times. I don't know, healing times, that a thing. I've had the most nurturing moments where I reached out and asked for help in a situation where I wouldn't ask for help, and they said yes. And I was like, well, okay, that's cool. This is a cool little strategy that I've never tried before. And I got a lot out of that, just to be able to be vulnerable enough to ask for help. And you touched on that a little bit too. And, I think the importance of having people around us that are not part of the space is actually pretty important, because I feel like and I don't like to use the word space, like as a community, I feel like there's a sense of a bit of exceptionalism sometimes in the space of like, I am completely outraged that they said this, like, what kind of person are they? And we sort of have this idea that people in this space are like, higher than others, better than others. And then we get disappointed sometimes because they're like, oh, I thought you'd do better than that. But actually we're just humans and we're going to mess up a lot. And we have to have that own humbleness towards ourselves, that we're also kind of messed up in some ways, and that's okay. We can hold it together and move forward together. And so I think there's a lot of, missed opportunities for repair and also elevating of others, because we kind of shun people away because they didn't do things the way we expect the medicine to teach us. But it's a lifelong process to do that.
Oh my gosh, I love that so much. And thank you for touching on that. I've met a lot of people that maybe weren't fully on the inside of the psychedelic space, but that are also running psychedelic businesses, but maybe not, feeling fully included in kind of the psychedelic community. And of course, there's going to be those, it is very natural for humans to, judge and create these kinds of opportunities where, hi Zeppelin. Where maybe it doesn't feel fully, involved for everyone, but it is a good reminder that we need to take the walls down, keep removing the walls, keep doing our own personal work, and keep being hearts open to people being human and making mistakes and saying things they shouldn't have said. Like I've probably said so many things I shouldn't have said on podcasts. I'm sure you can go through and be like, oh, Rebecca, that was an awkward one. But you know what? Like it's just, I am here who I am now, and that's going to change in a year, right? I'm going to learn more in a year. I'm going to keep learning. I'm going to keep putting myself into whatever trainings I can. Like I just did the Beckley Academy, the Foundations of Psychedelic Assisted Therapy last year. And again, it was incredible. And I knew a lot of the information, but my gosh, it's always so good to revisit. And it's always so good to have opportunity to talk further and more deeply into all of these things. But there is nothing set in stone. There's not one way to do everything. There's a gazillion
Mhm.
ways to do the work. And
Yeah, there
there's,
are a zillion ways. It's true, and I think
yeah,
that's part of the I guess the segmentation of groups. I think is that people have a certain way, and then they kind of shun the others, and then they have a certain approach, and they're like, well, I know better, and
this
I
way or the
think
highway.
it's my way or the highway, and obviously when we're trying to reframe business and just being in community together, I think that a big part of what this medicine is trying to teach us is diversity and inclusion, and that we don't know a whole lot. We're just humans. We're on a rock flying in space, and we don't know a whole lot. And there's a whole lot more that we can learn, and a lot of better ways that can emerge from being in this space, because we're at the edge oftentimes of new learnings and new teachings that are completely countercultural. Sometimes I feel like an alien in the world sometimes, because this
Yeah.
is really at the frontier of mental and health and wellness, and some of the stuff we talk every day as business owners is something that would feel extremely strange to 98% of people. And so
Yeah.
that with that, I think comes a really, it's a privilege and also a big responsibility to show up in this space in a way that as much as we can reflects the teachings of the medicine, which disclaimer, no one is close to be able to do that fully, but we're trying. And so it's a beautiful journey. Yeah.
Yeah. I felt that too. It's just like, I felt, almost such the privilege of having the opportunity to be able to speak on the behalf of a lot of people that don't have the opportunity to. So to speak for different socioeconomic groups or different communities that really do need the support but aren't getting it because, for instance, retreats are so expensive. How do we everyone there so that it's not just built for elitists and people that just have money just to spend, so that they can just continue to explore their life in this world. And so it's all of these different components around that. But there's certainly not one way. I mean, now there's all these different stacking opportunities with different medicines, and and people are there. There's still the bit of the Wild West component, and especially being a mom too in this space has been interesting for me, in the school playground.
Let's talk about that a bit. Like, what's been your experience with that? Like, if you want to share anything about it, like
Well, I do have to say, I mean, what a incredible opportunity I had. So when we were making investments in this space, one of our first investments was Beckley Retreats and Beckley Wave. So we became very close with, the Beckley Foundation. And I was like, I really have to do, I was invited to one of the first Beckley retreats to experience what their offering was. And I had never done any type of psychedelic retreat like this before, or any, large dose, macrodose. I'd experimented before, obviously, but I fully committed, which is hard as a single mom to finally just say, I'm going to do this work. I'm going to let go. This is it. I'm just going to trust. Because, my marriage ended when my kids were very young. So for me, it was like, go, 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 go. My central nervous system, I was extremely frayed. I was handling it quite well, as best I could. But I really had no idea that I needed this experience. And Amanda Fielding was at the retreat with me, and which was a crazy honor and incredible, a queen of psychedelics. At that point, she was 79 years old. And she was also, a mom, and a single mom for a while, of two boys, of Rock and Cosmo. And she, our second ceremony, we were right beside each other. And she's on the maps, and we became the mischievous ones together. And sometimes she'd turn to me and she'd hold my hand, and she was like, "Isn't it so beautiful?" And I was like, "This is my hero." I couldn't even speak. I was just like a melty mushroom, just like what was happening. But I was like, incredible to be by this OG. I've said this 3 times now in this conversation, this original gangster of the psychedelic space. She's been advocating for psychedelic research and psychedelic assisted therapy for over 30 years. She, was experimenting with consciousness for probably most of her life. And I was thinking, wow, like, look at everything she's accomplished. Mother, 2 boys, look at everything she's done. And she's still fighting so hard to create this opportunity for people to create
Mm-hmm.
deeper healing opportunities. And it gave me such a boost of confidence that I was on the right path, because obviously, I had felt judgment from other mothers. I had felt like I'm not on the normal path as like all of, these other moms that are intact families and these perfect families. And I was like, well,
Mm-hmm.
that's not my journey right now. But at the
Mm-hmm.
same time, so grateful, so grateful. I've always been one that's thought outside the box. I've always been one that's kind of carved my own path. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's definitely been an interesting journey, but you quickly realize who's supposed to be in your life and who's not. And that feels really good too.
Mm-hmm.
So
And all those parts you bring to your work and you bring to your relationship, so it creates a uniqueness and a richness that other people may not be able to provide, and that's completely
mm,
complementary. Everyone brings their own flavor and their own essence to this space, and I think that's part of what makes it beautiful, is that all of them are welcome,
mhm,
and that all of them are part of this journey that we're walking together. And I think that's a beautiful thing. I find a lot of nurturing and nourishment in knowing that that's the case, that we're all walking this path together, and that we're all learning together. Um, and you touched on it a little bit, which I think is important to talk about as well, is reciprocity, and how to build models that the typical way would be that we take things and we use them and discard them, and the new way that the medicines are teaching us is to uh, regenerate, nourish back, give back, honor all relationships. How does that look like for you as in terms of business, as a facilitator or as a retreat? Like maybe we can take a retreat as an example, as one of the core pieces to me of a healthy and solid retreat is their reciprocity. How are they relating to the local community, whether they're in Canada or Costa Rica or Peru? Like those things matter. How are they in relationship to the land? Those type of things.
oh my God, so important. And the land is sacred, right? Especially if you're doing medicine work on that piece of land, that land is sacred. It is holding so much power. And you can feel it when you go to these places that, I went to Holos recently, and the first time I went to
Mm-hmm.
Holos, I stepped into the Maloka and I just walked to the center by myself, and I lay down in the middle of the room and I just wept because it just
Oh.
took over me. And it was like the energy from the land was just radiating. It was palpable. And it was like, it
Mm-hmm.
was holding so much for so many people for,
Mm-hmm.
at that point, couple years. So yeah, and again, like working with the different indigenous groups in those communities, making sure that opportunities are there for selling art or being a part of the operations, or even just sharing their wisdom, and continuing to bring that back and forth. I was actually supposed to spend time with the Baruka tribe there, and I'm still hoping that I can at some point. But I connected with them, and I asked permission if I could go spend time with them, and I
Mm-hmm.
was like my contact had to go and speak with them about that, and obviously I would bring a translator, but it was really again about just being there and listening. Like,
Mm-hmm.
just saying anything, it's just go and listen, right? It's just
Mm-hmm.
listen. And like sure, I would love to spend time with the children and have those one-on-one times. And I've done that. I did that with a group, a philanthropic trek in Nepal, and the most incredible opportunity was being with the children. And because we don't need to speak the same language, because
Yeah.
it is this energy, and we're just there together as humans. Kids don't see you and judge
Mm-hmm.
you. Kids don't wonder what you want or why or how much money they're going to get. They're just there. Like, oh, who are you? Like, let's just play. Let's
Yeah.
smile and peek around corners. Like, that's kind of the magical element of this. And we talk a lot too about, again, bringing in that childlike wonder and bringing in the sense of play into all of these opportunities. But again, like with
Mm-hmm.
retreats, scholarship programs, raising money in the foundation so that we can bring different socioeconomic groups in. Potentially, I've heard of different models where CEOs or kind of more higher end people that can spend more money would spend more money, and then that would go kind of in a bucket where kind of other people could come in and
Mm-hmm.
take those spots as well. But it is hard because again, it's
Mm-hmm.
hard to run retreats. you know, it's hard to fill
Yeah.
retreats. It's hard to keep them going, you know, week after week, whatever, you know, model people are working with. The retreat business, it's a really tough business to be in.
Yeah, it absolutely is. You know, and I want to give a quick shout out to my good friend Ian Michael, who created
Like,
Holos, and he's put his heart and soul into that place. And he started with like basically, you know, a lot of dirt, and a big
yes,
vision. And I've been following the project, and you know, I just want to, you know, just really honor him and everyone else out there who's running retreats, because as you said, it's extremely difficult. I think we've all been through the experience of going through a ceremony like, I'm going to start a retreat. We're going to have a land in the community. And me and
yeah.
Elaine did that too. Like before Nectar, we're like, oh, we're going to open a retreat. So we looked at a land and we did the whole numbers, and we're like, you know what? This is actually really hard,
It's so
like from a
important. I
business
get so many
perspective.
people, yeah, like so many different companies have come to me because I was the retreat, you know, business side of thing. Like we invested in many retreats, and I had so many people coming to me like, how do we do this? How do we make this work? And oftentimes I said, like, this is really hard. Like you have to make sure you understand how hard this is going to be. And it's not probably going to get that much easier. It's
Hmm.
always going to be hard. And it's going to
Yeah.
be incredible. You're going to feel really good about the work you do. You're really going to help people, but it's really hard to keep it going. And eventually it might be too much. I hate to say that, but unless you have like, you know, a big team that are, you know, and unless you have a good marketing plan where you can
Hmm.
really keep selling and filling those retreats, it's really tough. Even, you know, with Holos, they're renting out the space a lot now for other facilitators to come in with their communities, which is
Hmm.
great, right? That's an incredible model to work with as well.
Yeah, because I think, you know, retreat by itself is like a hotel mixed with a healing center, mixed with other, like an operations juggernaut basically, and a marketing machine you need, and client care.
Right.
Which, and I'm just going to plug Nectar real quick. Is that's why we created Nectar, is to help support the retreats that are doing this, so they don't have to hold everything on their own. And I think that's part of the old model that we've often fallen into as business folks, is that we want to create everything by ourselves, and we feel the need to scale the team and scale the funding, and there's so many trappings that come with that. And I don't believe that highly funded retreats is the way to go. I think it's the more about hundreds of small retreats. And there's a person, Miles, who was one of the fundraisers for Synthesis, which obviously, for those who don't know, raised a bunch of money, blew up, and just it was a whole thing. He now runs a retreat called Confluence in Oregon, and after going
Mm,
through the Synthesis thing of like big, fast, and too much, he now runs a very small scale retreat with like one group every month, and he's loving it, and it's so intentional, and it's in the forest, and there's no pressure from capital and
love,
investors and having too much of a team. And I find that
yeah.
beautiful. There's a lot of people like that, like Alalajo, Jennifer Tesler in Spain and Netherlands, that are doing that sort of work, that their nervous system feels great doing
Mm.
this.
Oh,
Sorry?
Anna? Is her name
No,
Anna?
Jennifer at Alalajo.
Oh,
They
okay.
have like 6 or 8 retreats a year, and
And
you know,
nice.
their team is nourished, and their nervous system feels good. They do it small, and people love the experience because of that. There's no like sort of rush every month to fill out their retreats, which is a trap. I think it can help people. I'm not saying it can't be helpful, but it's also very difficult to hold that kind of ship. And everyone I've talked to in the retreat business has been struggling in some way with that sort of stuff. So it's you know, we're trying to serve, and also like, you know, scaling the service to what feels good for our soul, I think, is important as well.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing to, you know, keep in mind for healers as well. When you're holding space for somebody, but then all of a sudden you have to turn around the next day, and you know, after healing everyone's, you know, darkness, you turn around the next day and you're like, oh, now I have to fill the next retreat, and what's next? And like, oh my gosh, and this problem, this problem, this problem, this problem. It's
Mhm.
eventually it's just way too much, and it's tough if you don't have the right support.
Yeah, so small scale, supported, a network that supports each other, I think, to me, is like a way forward that feels really nurturing, and also sustainable. I think there's
Mhm.
definitely a sense of like burning out sometimes, where we're trying to grow these things and we end up burning ourselves out, and that's not really
Yeah.
sustainable. Um, I'd like to touch a little bit on pricing, which is something that we touch on briefly. I used to be very, and accessibility is a very important thing for me, and Nectara as well. And also, I've seen people charge like $15,000 for retreats, or like, these like big sort of like pricing structures. I used to be of the mind that there's no space for that. There's no place for that sort of thing. And I still mostly believe that, but also I check myself in that and saying that there's different access points for different folks that maybe prefer a certain way of what's your take on sort of the pricing range of, someone struggling to make ends meet at $200, and then some people charging $50,000 for an experience. Like, do you think that's part of the muckiness of the space, or like, what's your take on sort of pricing and access?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, the people that I've met, all different, kind of spaces of, people that want to do this work. And there's the high end of like hedge fund investor, a hedge fund founder that has incredible means to spend on things that make them feel really good. And then, there's people that just don't have billions of dollars to do the same thing. So, I mean, it's an interesting conversation. I mean, I think that it just comes down to, we all need the work. We all, if you're interested in doing the work, how to do that. So somebody that wants to do the work that has all this means, maybe they don't want to go sleep on a dirt floor in Peru, but maybe they want to spend, $20,000 on a 5-star private island experience. I don't know if they're going to get what they need out of that experience. It might just be too, flashy. It might be too sparkly. It might just be not the work that they probably need, like I was talking about, like, it's really important to have the discomfort. It's really important to go back, before all of the richness came. It's really important to be barefoot on the ground and to get dirty.
Yes,
and to
please.
like roll around in the mud and not worry about it, right? Not having your linens perfectly clean for you for once. Like, really, like we're like a soul in a human body having a human experience. So let's give ourselves the opportunity to go back to that, right? Like, go back. Like, I think that really there is a really important part in kind of the dirty side of this type of work, like the shadow side. We really do have to understand that the importance of stepping into the shadow. Of course, comfort is important, but it's not everybody's cup of tea. But I do think that there's different levels for every person and what they're looking for. And maybe they start with the really high end, and then they kind of finally start to break through, and then they're ready to kind of go maybe middle of the road, maybe like a $7,000 retreat. And then they're like, well, maybe I'll stay here. No, but you never know. Maybe, maybe, going to Peru and like having the, sleeping on a dirt floor would be actually exactly what they needed. But again, it never ends. Healing work never ends. So it was like when I first started teaching yoga, I worked at a studio that didn't do any Sanskrit, didn't do any of the traditional yogic values that I was trained with. And I remember the owner came into one of my first classes that I taught, and we owned at the end of class. And she said, "That was a really great class, Rebecca. But one thing, we don't own here." And I was like, "What?" She's like, "No." But it was her business model. And what she did was actually quite clever, because she was bringing people into practicing yoga that had never practiced yoga before, but they were too intimidated to go to traditional yoga studios with the Sanskrit oming, with the traditional values. She got people to do yoga with cool music, with, with all of the same things, but just with a different type of language around it. And so regardless, yoga is a good thing, right? Whether it's this way or this way, it's still good work. They're still learning how to breathe, still moving their bodies. They're still in community, and they always feel better afterwards. So, I would hate to say that one way is better than the other way. I don't think that there's one way better than the other way. I think that if it is safe, if the container is set up properly, if the facilitators are taking proper care with, ethical practices, integrity, lots of wisdom and experience, then I think that, people are going to get what they need out of it.
I tend to agree with that. Absolutely. I think you're right that there needs to be a certain level of ethics and care. That's part of it, to not create harm that or supersedes the benefits that people get. And also there's different access points. You're right. There's different ways to different roads to Rome, right? I was just thinking, like, I live in Bali now, and one of the things that the communities do here is they have a temple space and have this big open space. It's just a floor of a roof basically. And every week the women gather there to do their own form of yoga, which is basically really like aggressive techno music, like the most
Yeah.
aggressive beat you can think of, and they just move together and they just move, they just stretch, and they just do all these things, and it kind of looks like yoga. I'm guessing they get the same feel out of it. The body opens up and they tense up, they release the tension, and they get together and move together. And yeah, it's amazing to see, because they're having such a blast, and it's not a fancy schmancy, yoga mats, or they don't have the money for that anyway, but they move their body, and it's healing. Might not
Yeah.
see it as healing, but it's
Yeah.
healing. So I love that. And one of my favorite quotes, and I have it in my email signature, is "Work is love made visible," which I believe is a
Mm,
Rumi quote. And I'm curious,
mm.
as we close, what are ways in your life right now, as a professional, as someone in the space, like, what are you working on to help you do that more of? What's a thing you're paying attention to these days personally?
Like the work that I'm focusing on for myself right now, like personal work.
Yes. Yeah, like
Mm.
your own sort of personal relationship to business side of things.
Yeah. Well, for me, it's always been about connection and treating people well. Like I was talking about
Me.
telling a story earlier today about somebody that I worked with in the past, but the way that they worked was very, um, in a way, A-type. So it was very almost like computer, like just get things done, get things done, get things done, but without the human element. Right. So for me, any kind of work that I do or people that I'm going to work with, truly, it is all about connecting
You need.
first. Like, let's connect, let's be humans first, and then we'll get the job done. And, that's always worked for me. And I have incredible, incredible network of people around the world now. And I feel so grateful for everyone I've met. But it's really about, be a good person. And then people will always answer your call, no matter what. Right.
That's
Just
so
like,
Canadian of you.
but really and for me it's too about, from all of my different physical practices and kind of my own spiritual practices, it's about breath, and it's about grounding myself. And
Mhm.
when I sense the energy from the other person is being blocked, or like, how can I share mine? Right? Like,
Mhm.
how can I almost say, kind of energetically, how can I help you? And how can we move through this together? Right. Whereas I think that there's a lot of people that are in pain and they feel really like they're alone. And so, how do we do this together? And like you said, in the psychedelic space, how do we join all of these communities? How do we continue to grow together? Not one way is the best way. We're just all trying to figure it out still. So for me, it's really about the human care comes first, and then we can
Yeah.
figure it all.
Yeah, that I follow that as well. It's a beautiful thing. It's simple, and it brings us back to our roots and who we truly are. It's easy to get lost in this sort of bigness and complexity of it all, but ultimately we're just humans, and there's a lot we can do with each other, and support one another and ourselves as well. Like, nurturing and rest to me is my biggest stuff these days. For the last few
Yeah.
years, is learning how to rest. I was also a bit of a type, like progressing and moving forward type of person, and the work has taught me just to slow down a lot and to
Well,
be
maybe
able
it
to
was
serve.
Bali as well, Pascal. Maybe it was
Well, that
Bali that.
too. Yeah, Mama Bali is nurturing and teaching me how to just go with the flow. Like, it's part of the culture here. It's like people on their
Mm,
bikes, they're like super chill, and I've seen more
yeah,
smiles here than anywhere else in the world. Like, genuine smiles from people every day.
yeah,
That's really taught me about the simplicity of just being in a way that's joyful. So
yeah.
a lot of my
And
work has been around that.
yeah, and to be honest, I think that silence is so important too.
It's
And you know,
absolutely. I
like
shared
just
it in the the newsletter that
So
we share every few weeks, just earlier, like this song called Quiet by Ajit, which is all about silence. And I'm like, yes, silence, please. Yes.
so important, and it's like, there's so many people too right now are, we're talking about, all of these people out there are spending, fit all of this money on everything to fix themselves, and all these gurus, and 8 coaches, and all of these different, and they're working on all different things. But like, how about you just be by yourself, right? Why don't you just start there? And this is almost going back to the very start of our conversation, which is kind of nice, bookended a little bit, is like, just sit with yourself, just breathe into your heart. And so many people have such a hard time just sitting in silence and just breathing, because they're so afraid of their own thoughts and where they're going to go. But the more you do it, you can call it meditation, you can call it whatever you want, you can call it just breathing. But it's really, just a form of solitude and caretaking for your own heart. And nobody can do that for you.
Yeah, beautiful. It's like Shanti talks about this. It's like we're kind of addicted to the fire, the campfire, but then actually the real richness is behind the fire, looking away from the fire, the senses and the sounds and the beauty of life, which it is beautiful. But spending time away, looking away from the fire is very enriching and nurturing. And there's a whole lot of depth there that can be found there. And I think service, if it comes from that space, can be more effective, more beautiful, and more connecting. So thanks for sharing that. I think that's something that for us in the service space is important to also do that, not just be externally focused. So thank you, Rebecca, so much for sharing and being there, and also Zeppelin for his special appearance. That's probably the cutest. I want to pet him one day because he's just so fluffy and cute.
He's mad at me.
Amazing. Yeah. He's mad at you.
Yeah, he's giving me the silent treatment now. He won't look at me. He's over there.
Just a few snacks and a few pets around the ear. He'll be fine. Okay, thank you, Rebecca. Be well, and thanks for your work.
Thank you so much, Pascal. We'll talk soon. Thank you for your work. Nectar is an amazing company, and it's been incredible watching your journey too.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Be well. Bye.
You too.